Have you ever imagined being humiliated in public just because of your skin color? Now imagine that happening while you're trying to buy a gift for someone you love. That's exactly what happened to Jamal, a 17-year-old who just wanted to surprise his mother. He walked into a luxury jewelry store, never imagining he would leave escorted by police officers, until one detail changed everything and made those who accused him bitterly regret it. Now pay attention to this story, because the lesson here is powerful. Jamal Carter was walking through the shiny hallways of a luxury mall in New York. The air conditioning cooled the atmosphere, and the windows of famous designer stores reflected the strong ceiling lights. Well-dressed people passed by in a hurry, some carrying expensive bags, others just strolling. But Jamal had a clear objective. In his pocket, he firmly held his credit card. He had saved for months, working after school, cutting expenses, and planning that special moment. He wanted to buy a ring for his mother, Miriam Carter, a strong woman who always fought to give him the best life possible. It was her birthday that week, and Jamal wanted to surprise her. He knew that an expensive gift wouldn't repay everything she had done for him, but he wanted her to feel special. That's when he stopped in front of an elegant jewelry store, with a golden name written at the entrance. The glass sparkled, displaying necklaces and rings that looked like they cost a fortune. He took a deep breath. He knew he didn't look like the kind of customer that store was used to serving, but that didn't stop him. He pushed the door open and walked in. The sound of his footsteps echoed on the polished marble floor. The environment was empty, silent, almost cold. There were no other customers, just a middle-aged saleswoman with a stern look, wearing a blue suit, standing behind the counter. She lifted her eyes and looked him up and down, taking a little longer than necessary. Jamal smiled and walked to the counter. "Good afternoon. I'm looking for a ring for my mum. A birthday gift." The woman narrowed her eyes as if trying to assess whether he was serious. Her name was Mrs. Thompson, and from the way she looked at him, she had already judged who he was without needing another word. "A diamond ring?" she asked, with a tone that mixed distrust and mockery. Jamal nodded. "That's right. I want something beautiful, something special." The woman tilted her head to the side and crossed her arms, not even bothering to get the key to the display case. "And do you have money for that?" Jamal's smile disappeared. Instantly, he took a deep breath, trying not to show irritation. He had heard that kind of thing before, but he wasn't going to let it ruin the moment. Without saying a word, he pulled the credit card from his pocket and placed it on the counter. The saleswoman looked at the card, then back at his face. A tense silence filled the room. Then, instead of opening the display case, she discreetly picked up the phone and dialed a number. "Hello, this is the jewelry store at Plaza Mall. There's a suspect here, a young black male, alone, looking at the jewelry. I think he might try to steal something. Can you come quickly?" She hung up without saying another word to Jamal, and then gave a fake smile. "One moment, dear, I'll get a model from the safe," she said, and walked away, leaving Jamal there, unaware that his life was about to change completely. Jamal remained standing at the counter, suspecting nothing. He was looking at the displayed jewelry, imagining which one would be the best for his mom. But deep down, something felt off. The store was empty, and the saleswoman was taking longer than usual to return. He felt a chill run down his spine. That's when the store door burst open. 2 police officers entered quickly, their boots hitting hard against the marble floor. Officer Reynolds and Officer Miller, both white men wearing sunglasses, hands near their holstered guns as if they were about to arrest a dangerous criminal. Jamal turned, confused. "Hands where I can see them!" shouted Officer Reynolds, pointing at him. For a second, Jamal didn't understand. His heart raced. "What?" I said. "Hands where I can see them!" Reynolds repeated, now drawing his gun. Terrified, Jamal raised his hands immediately. The saleswoman, Mrs. Thompson, reappeared from the back of the store, looking satisfied. She crossed her arms like someone saying, "I knew it." "What's going on?" Jamal asked, his voice trembling. The officers quickly approached. Reynolds grabbed Jamal's arm, yanking him roughly. Be quiet. We received a report that you were trying to rob the store. What? Jamal's eyes widened. I'm just buying a gift for my mum. The other officer, Miller, picked up Jamal's credit card that was still on the counter. He looked at the card, then at the boy, and let out a mocking laugh. This is stolen, isn't it? Jamal felt a mix of rage and fear. No! I worked to earn that money. I didn't do anything wrong. But they didn't listen. Reynolds turned Jamal around and shoved him against the counter while Miller began to frisk him roughly. Any weapons on you? Miller asked. I'm not armed, Jamal replied, trying to contain his desperation. People outside the store began to gather, watching the commotion, but no one did anything. The saleswoman just watched the scene with her arms crossed, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. Jamal felt a knot in his throat. This wasn't the first time he'd been looked at like that, presumed a criminal just because of his appearance, but this time it was worse. He was being humiliated in public for something he hadn't even done. Reynolds held up his ID and read the name aloud. Then his face went pale. Miller noticed his partner's reaction. What is it? Reynolds swallowed hard, as if the ground had disappeared under his feet. He looked again at the ID, then at Jamal, and finally realized the size of the mistake they had made. Because there, written in large letters, was the name of Jamal's mother, son of Miriam Carter, director of the FBI. Silence filled the room. The tables had turned. The silence inside the store was so intense you could hear Jamal's heartbeat. The officers who seconds ago treated him like just another suspect now exchanged nervous glances. Officer Reynolds held the ID like he had just touched something radioactive. Miriam Carter, he murmured, cold sweat running down his forehead. Miriam Carter was no ordinary person. She was the director of the FBI in New York, a woman known for her strict posture, intelligence, and zero tolerance for serious mistakes by authorities. And now, those two officers had just massively screwed up with her son. Jamal sensed something had changed. The tone of the officers' voices wasn't the same anymore. Listen, kid, said Reynolds, trying to sound calmer. It was just a misunderstanding. He let go of Jamal's arm, which was still pressed against the counter. Yeah, a mistake, added Officer Miller, now trying to seem friendly, but it was already too late. Outside the store, the doors of a black car had just opened. A group of people walked into the mall with firm steps and serious expressions, all wearing impeccable suits and earpieces, and in the middle of them a tall, elegant woman walked in front. Miriam Carter. Her eyes locked straight onto Jamal, then the officers, her expression pure ice. When the mall security saw who was coming, some quietly stepped aside. That woman wasn't there to talk. She stopped at the entrance of the jewelry store, placed her hands in the pockets of her elegant coat, and let a heavy silence settle before speaking. Then, with a voice controlled but sharp as a blade, she asked, "What's going on here?" The officers froze. The saleswoman, who had seemed so confident just moments earlier, took a step back, feeling the weight of the woman's presence. Jamal looked at his mother, feeling immediate relief, but also a wave of tension. He knew what was coming, and knew no one there would leave unscathed. The mood in the store shifted entirely. If before the police had control of the situation, now it was Miriam Carter calling the shots. Officers Reynolds and Miller looked visibly uncomfortable. The saleswoman, Mrs. Thompson, who earlier had seemed so confident in calling the police, now looked like a frozen statue behind the counter. Miriam didn't need to raise her voice. Her presence alone was intimidating. She looked at her son first, checking if he was okay. Jamal tried to hide it, but he was still trembling slightly after the violent approach. "Are you hurt?" Miriam asked, her voice low but laced with danger. Jamal shook his head, swallowing hard. "No, Mom, they just treated me like a criminal for no reason." That sentence dropped like a bomb in the room. Miriam slowly turned to the officers, her eyes cold as ice. "I'll ask only once." Her voice was low, but every word carried the weight of a courtroom sentence. "Why did you approach my son like this?" The officers looked at each other, nervous. Reynolds, who had been so arrogant before, now struggled to find the right words. "We received a report from the saleswoman," he said, pointing to Mrs. Thompson, trying to shift the blame away from himself. "They said there was a suspect in the store." Miriam raised her eyebrows. "A suspect?" The officer swallowed hard. "Yes, ma'am. A young man, alone, looking at expensive jewelry." The room went silent for a few seconds. Then Miriam let out a soft laugh, but there was no trace of humor in it. "So let me get this straight," she said, stepping forward, each of her steps echoing on the marble floor. My son walks into a jewelry store to buy a gift for his own mother, and you assume he's a criminal?" No one answered. Officer Miller looked at Reynolds, hoping he'd say something, but Reynolds was completely speechless. That's when Miriam turned to the saleswoman. "Mrs. Thompson, correct?" The woman, who had been pretending not to be there, widened her eyes. "Yes, I am." "Were you the one who called the police?" The saleswoman hesitated for a second, trying to come up with a quick excuse, but Miriam already knew the truth. "Answer, was it you or not?" The saleswoman felt a cold sweat run down her neck. I thought something might be happening. He was alone and you decided he shouldn't be here, right?" Miriam interrupted, crossing her arms. "You decided he couldn't afford anything in this store, that he must be here for some other reason." "That's not what I meant," the woman tried to defend herself. "Oh, it is what you meant." Miriam's tone was as firm as stone. The saleswoman swallowed hard, realizing there was no way out. Then Miriam took out her phone, unlocked the screen, and began dialing a number. The officers grew tense. What are you doing?" Reynolds asked. Miriam looked up slowly. "Calling your boss. I want to see how he'll react when he hears two of his officers humiliated the son of the FBI director for no reason." The color drained from the officers' faces. Now they were really in trouble. The silence inside the jewelry store was absolute. Everyone was watching Miriam, who now held the phone to her ear, waiting for the call to connect. The officers knew exactly what that meant. Officer Reynolds, who had been so full of authority before, was now sweating bullets. He stepped forward, trying to defuse the situation. "Director Carter," he began, his voice no longer arrogant. Let's resolve this here without involving others." "It was a mistake, a misunderstanding." Miriam raised an eyebrow but said nothing. On the other end of the line, a deep voice answered. "Agent Smith, FBI. Who is this?" Miriam kept her eyes locked on Reynolds as she replied slowly. "This is Miriam Carter, director of the New York unit. I need you at the Plaza Mall immediately. We have a case of abuse of authority and unlawful humiliation." Reynolds' face went pale. Miller, the other officer, tried to intervene, desperate. "Ma'am, you don't have to do this. We didn't know he was your son." Miriam locked eyes with him and crossed her arms. "Oh, so if he wasn't my son, you think this would have been acceptable?" Both men swallowed hard. They had no more arguments. Suddenly the jewelry store doors swung open and 3 FBI agents entered. They weren't there to play. "Director Carter, we're here," one of the agents said, already speaking into a radio to call for backup. The officers knew they had just lost everything. Miriam looked at them one last time and delivered their fate. "Remove these two from duty immediately. I want a full report of this abuse of authority on my desk before the end of the day." Miller tried to say something, but Reynolds grabbed his arm and shook his head. They knew it was over. The FBI agents escorted them out of the jewelry store while shoppers passing by stared at the scene. The same officers who had humiliated Jamal now left in shame. The silence inside the store was heavy. With the officers gone, only one person remained to be held accountable: the saleswoman, Mrs. Thompson. She stood pale, hands crossed in front of her, avoiding Miriam Carter's gaze. But Miriam wasn't about to let her off easy. She took a step forward with that cold look that made even experienced FBI agents tremble. "Mrs. Thompson, you were the one who called the police, correct?" The saleswoman hesitated, but she knew it was no use lying. "Yes, But I only did it because I thought it was the right thing. Miriam raised her eyebrows, pretending to be intrigued. The right thing. The saleswoman swallowed hard, realizing she had said too much. Well, he was alone, looking at expensive jewelry. She went silent, but it was already too late. Miriam Carter crossed her arms, not hiding her disdain. You didn't even ask if he could pay. Didn't even try to treat him like a regular customer. The saleswoman opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. That's when a tall, well-dressed man entered the store. It was Andrew Collins, the jewelry store manager. He looked furious. "Director Carter, I'm responsible for this store," he said, then turned to the saleswoman, clearly irritated. "I just reviewed the security footage." The saleswoman's knees went weak. I just did what I thought was best for the store's safety." The manager took a deep breath, trying to stay composed. "Best for the store? You humiliated a customer, called the police without cause, and damaged our reputation." He paused, then declared, "You're fired." The saleswoman froze. "What? You can't do that." "Yes, I can," the manager said impatiently. "Pack your things and leave. Now." Her face turned red with shame and anger, but there was nothing she could do. She cast one last glance at Miriam, as if hoping for mercy, but Miriam Carter remained unmoved. So Mrs. Thompson lowered her head, grabbed her purse, and left the store as quickly as she could. Outside, people stared at her, whispering. She disappeared into the mall without looking back. Now, justice was being served, but something was still missing. With the saleswoman fired and the officers suspended, the atmosphere in the jewelry store had changed. With the tension gone, Jamal could finally do what he came to do: buy a gift for his mother. Store manager Andrew Collins still looked embarrassed about everything that had happened. He adjusted his tie and cleared his throat before speaking. "Mr. Carter, I truly apologize. This should never have happened." Miriam kept a serious expression and said nothing, but it was Jamal who spoke first. He looked at his mother, then turned to the manager. "I just want to buy her a gift. May I?" The manager nodded quickly. "Of course. In fact, I'd like to offer the jewelry of your choice as an apology from the store." Jamal looked at his mother again, waiting for her reaction. Miriam gave a small half-smile and shook her head. "My son can afford a gift for his mother." Without hesitation, Jamal placed his card on the counter. The manager looked surprised but didn't argue. He signaled to a new saleswoman, a young and friendly woman, who immediately opened the display case and began showing rings. This time, no one looked at him with suspicion. He picked a small but elegant diamond ring, perfect for his mother. Jamal smiled as he held it in his hands, finally satisfied. The new saleswoman wrapped the jewelry carefully, and when she handed over the small bag, Jamal felt the mission was complete. Miriam looked at her son with pride. This gift will mean more than any diamond. And so, mother and son left the jewelry store together, knowing that this was not just a simple purchase, it was a victory. Outside the mall, Jamal and Miriam walked side by side, breathing the fresh air after everything they'd been through inside. Jamal held the jewelry bag tightly, still feeling the weight of everything that had happened. "What a day, huh?" he murmured, letting out a sigh. Miriam gave a faint smile, but her gaze remained serious. "Unfortunately, some people still judge others without knowing the truth," she said, looking at her son. Jamal stopped for a moment and looked at his mother. "But today was different. Today you turned the tables." Miriam crossed her arms and took a deep breath before responding. "Jamal, no one can take your dignity unless you allow them to. Never bow your head to anyone who tries to belittle you." Jamal nodded, taking that lesson to heart. He smiled and handed his mother the small ring box. "Happy birthday, Mom. I hope you like it. It cost a little more than I expected." Miriam looked at her son, surprised. She took the box and opened it. Inside, the ring sparkled under the sunlight. Her eyes welled up. "My son, it's beautiful." She hugged Jamal tightly. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Justice had been served. Respect had been restored. And more than anything, Jamal knew he had the most incredible mother in the world by his side. In the end, justice was done. The officers who humiliated Jamal were removed from duty. The saleswoman who called the police was fired. And Jamal proved that no one gets to define who he is except him. Now tell me, how many times has something like this happened to someone who doesn't have a powerful mother to defend them? If you think this story brought an important lesson, leave your comment below and share it with someone who needs to hear this. And of course, subscribe to the channel for more stories that make us think.